So what we have here is Sir Malcolm Campbell's 1937 Bluebird, world water speed record breaking boat. Its race number was K3, so it's now known as K3 Bluebird. But the story of the boat goes back a little bit further to 1935. Sir Malcolm Campbell had become a household name, racing his cars at racing circuits, and then in the 1920s he started doing land speed record breaking, and he got the land speed record up over 300 miles an hour for the first time in his Bluebird car, and he was at about 52, 53 years of age. And everybody thought once he got that milestone, 300 on land, that he was going to retire. And Sir Malcolm Campbell had other ideas. He promptly announced that he was going to try and regain the world water speed record for Great Britain, because at that point the water speed record was in the American hands, and that was held by Garfield Wood in his boat called Miss America. It had 4 Packard engines in it, 7,000 horsepower, and its top speed was 124 miles per hour. And that was what Sir Malcolm Campbell wanted to beat and get the record back for Great Britain. So he commissioned this boat to be built. The hull is a single step hydroplane. This is its cradle that it sits on, and the rest of it is the boat. When I finish doing the talk, you can have a look around, and you'll see, if you go further up the hull there, you'll see a step in the hull like that. And that's called a step hydroplane. So he got a designer called Fred Cooper to do the hull design for him. Cooper is well known in high speed hull design. And he got Saunders Roe on the Isle of Wight to actually build the hull for him to Fred Cooper's design. And he had the Rolls Royce engine that was in his car that did 300 miles an hour, which was an R-type racing aviation Rolls Royce engine, 2,000 horsepower, 2,000 plus, running on special fuels. But he took the engine out of the car and used the same engine in the boat, 36.5 litres supercharged. So it's quite revolutionary, the fact that he was going to try and take the record with just one engine powering the boat, as opposed to the Miss America boat that had 4 Packard engines. So he had a gentleman called Reed Rowton worked on the project with him as the mechanical engineer. Reed Rowton was a very gifted engineer. He owned a company called Thompson and Taylor at Brooklands Engineering Works. And Reed Rowton did all the mechanical calculations. He actually designed the gearbox for the boat, so it was a one-off bespoke gearbox. And he did a lot of the number crunching involved with the project. And of course Leo Villa, who was Sir Malcolm Campbell's chief mechanic, was in charge of the Rolls Royce engine. And Rolls Royce also sent specialist mechanics to help Leo Villa run the very specialised engine. So it was a very, very British, very British boat, and everybody involved with it was British. So by February 1937, the boat was built, and on its cradle it was dispatched up to Loch Lomond for its first initial trials. And on Loch Lomond they were getting up to 95 miles per hour, but were struggling to get the boat over 100 miles per hour. And that was down to primarily the conditions that prevailed on Loch Lomond, which was quite strong crosswinds. Maybe in February as well wasn't a great month to be up there. But basically they decided that if they were going to get anywhere near the record, they've got to try somewhere else, a different venue. And they actually looked to Europe to take the boat to, and in particular in the end they decided on Lake Maggiore in Switzerland. So Lake Maggiore, actually some of it's in Italy and some of it in Switzerland, and the border goes through the lake. But they actually chose the Swiss end of the lake to set their try and set the record. And they arrived at Lake Maggiore in July 1937 with the view for further testing and then with a view to having an attempt at the record. So they were there for quite some time. They had quite a few technical problems, mainly having trouble keeping the engine cool whilst it was running flat out. And they had various other problems with the tail, etc. on the boat and stuff like that. But eventually, by September 1937, 1st of September 1937, they were ready to call the timekeepers in and have a crack at actually doing the record, or getting the record itself. So 1st of September, Sir Malcolm Campbell was out and he opened the boat right up to full throttle, and on the 1st of September 1937 he broke the world water speed record for the first time with 126.5 miles per hour. He thought there was a bit more to be had out of the boat, so the next day on the 2nd of September 1937 he kept the timekeepers in place and he went back out. The conditions were slightly better than the day before and he raised his own record to 129.5 miles per hour. So he then got a little bit more gap between the old American record and his new record of 129. So they seemed quite happy with that, and there was quite a celebration. And at that point, the boat was a double world record breaking boat. The world water speed record was back in Great British hands. And they went back to the UK triumphant with their new record. And the boat was shown at various exhibitions around the UK over the winter of 37 and 38. But Sir Malcolm thought, I think there's a bit more to be had out of this boat yet. And so over the course of that winter there was some modifications done to the cooling system for the engine. They put a different shaped tail on, and this is actually the 1938 tail that's on the boat. The 1937 tail was basically like an ice cream cone stuck on the back, but it came quite a bit deeper down the transom here, and they had problems with it actually filling with water whilst they were shooting across the lake. And in the end, in 37, they actually took that tail off and did the record without the tail on. So they redesigned another tail, and this is its original 1938 tail. So other details, even small details like the windscreen on the front was shrunk down to the bare minimum size to cut down as much drag as possible for them to go back in August 1938. So they went back and in August 1938 they managed to raise their own record again to 130.9 miles per hour. So there wasn't a lot of gain, but they did get over that 130 miles an hour mark. And so the boat, basically this is the first boat on the planet ever to achieve 130 miles an hour on water. And that will never change, because here she is and that's what she achieved. It became at that point triple world record breaking boat, first boat to 230 miles an hour, but they felt the boat had actually reached its limit and they were not going to get any more speed out of the boat. So they returned back to the UK again, and the boat was displayed at exhibitions and big flag waving job was done for Great Britain, etc., and British engineering. And effectively, after that 1938 record, the boat was retired at that point. But Sir Malcolm Campbell already had his mind on the next project, which was another boat. And this boat was K4. This was a much more advanced hull. It was a concave hull, but he wanted all the running gear out of this boat. So the Rolls engine, the gearbox, the prop shafting, the dog clutch, the propeller shafting, everything was stripped out of the boat. And of course, new boats, very expensive, they wanted funding, and he funded, or part funded it, by selling the old hull off. He sold it into private hands, and they sold to the Simpson brothers, and they had a big second-hand car lot on the North Circular Road on the outskirts of London. And the old hull, which was empty then because all the running gear gone into the next boat, was basically a display piece, and it was on the forecourt of the car lot, and I guess people would be driving along and see, God, that's interesting, we've got this Bluebird. We go and have a look at that, and they go in there, and the old salesman, oh, the car needs a bit of updating, sir, would you like to come and see our stock? But it was basically, it was a draw, it was used for those purposes. But it was outside. So the Second World War breaks out, and obviously there's lots of bombing going on, and the Blitz, etc. And the old boat was living outside, open to the elements, and of course it started to suffer. The condition of the hull started to suffer. When the war finished, the record breaking started up again. Sir Malcolm Campbell passed away in 1948. Donald Campbell picked up the reins with K4, and K4 was destroyed in 1952, along with all the boat's original running gear. The only thing that was salvaged was the Rolls Royce engine. So the old hull was outside, and the years were ticking by, and the hull was getting worse and worse condition because it was outside of the elements. And by 1955 it was starting to look pretty shabby, a bit sorry for itself, and it was taken from the forecourt and put round the back of the garage, out of sight and out of mind. And by the 1960s, I have photographs of the hull in 1960s, and it was in a very, very poor state. The cockpit area had been destroyed and smashed off. The vandals had been in, and I suppose, souvenir hunters got it. All the instruments were gone. The decking was all holed, had big holes in it, and I think at that point it was in danger, maybe, of getting broken up and lost and sent to the bonfire. But fortunately, a gentleman called Lord Bolton took pity on it, and he managed to persuade the Simpson brothers to let the hull go, sell the hull. And Lord Bolton bought it, took it back to Bolton Castle, and was at least put in a shed like this. And Lord Bolton did a little bit of work on it, and he kept it till 1974, and then he resold it to Thorpe Park. It was called First Leisure Limited at that point. And it became, Thorpe Park at that point was a marine museum, and this basically became an exhibit at the museum at Thorpe Park. Thorpe Park painted it, all in the wrong colours, I hasten to add, and it became an exhibit, but it survived. It survived. Wind the clock forward another decade into the 80s, and Thorpe Park is becoming better known for its roller coasters and joy rides and that sort of stuff. And they were starting to sell off all their exhibits. And in 1988, my father got a tip-off that the hull of Sir Malcolm Campbell's boat was coming up for sale. And, cutting a long story short, we bought the hull from Thorpe Park. And when we first got it, it was in pretty poor shape. Well, it was in very poor shape. And when it came back to Filching Manor here, it was actually on our driveway in front of the house for a while. And then we put a little marquee up down there, and it lived in there for a couple of years. But we had some big questions to ask ourselves. What were we going to do with it? Were we going to just paint it up in the correct colours, make it look nice and keep it as a static exhibit? Or were we going to maybe do a hull restoration, maybe to the point where we can actually put it in the water and see it afloat? Or were we going to do a hull restoration and then put some mechanicals in it and try and make the whole thing work again? And that was pretty well in the philosophy of the rest of the collection, was that we like things to work. So we decided on the latter option, which was to try and restore the boat to work in order. Little did we know what we were getting into at the time. So in 1990, the hull was brought from the bottom of the premises into the workshop here, and between 1990 and 1996 there was a very thorough hull restoration took place. We had a retired yacht engineer, yacht builder, helped us with the restoration of the hull, and it took 6 years, but at the end of those 6 years the restoration was good, and we felt that the integrity and strength was back in the hull. And then we started on the mechanical side of things. We fitted a 27 litre Merlin engine into the hull. The record breaking engine is sitting over there, that big black one. That is rebuilds every 6 hours, and our pockets weren't going to stretch for that. So we fitted a descendant to the engine, which is the Merlin, into the boat. We could maintain that fairly easily. Other stuff like the rudder had to be built, the propeller shaft, the prop, all had to be made new. The dog clutch, the prop shafting, going forward to the forward mounted gearbox. The gearbox was a massive headache, and there was probably only one person in the world that was going to find a suitable gearbox for this boat, and that was my dad. The original gearbox, as I said earlier, was one-off, bespoke, Thompson and Taylor Reed Roughton design that was in the boat originally. That went into K4. K4 got destroyed in 1952. The gearbox went with it. So, eventually my father found an ex-MTB type V-drive gearbox, motor torpedo boat type gearbox, and that gearbox was restored and mounted in the boat. And at that point, very sadly, shortly after that, we lost Dad. 2003, died very suddenly, and that put a very large spanner in the works, the restoration. It took us 2 or 3 years to get sorted out, and myself and 2 other engineers took the project back up in 2008, and there was quite a lot still to do. She was probably about 65% restored at that point, but most of the jobs left were all mechanical jobs, and planning to try and run a boat like this in the modern world, we had to, for insurance purposes and safety purposes, we had to put stuff like modern electric bilge pumps in. We had to put bilge blowers in the hull and a lot of stuff, fire extinguisher systems around the engine, etc. So we made bid lists of jobs, and we worked down the lists of jobs, and when we got to the bottom of a list, 9 times out of 10 we'd found umpteen other jobs to do along the way. And the process worked in the end, because in 2011 we got to the bottom of one of our lists and we thought, well, we haven't really found too much else to do. It's about time we thought about putting the boat in the water again. So luckily we have a reservoir called Buell Reservoir, which is quite close to us. It's on the A21, and it's about an hour on the low loader to take the boat over there. And we arrived there on the 20th of September 2011, and the boat is lowered into the water backwards on her cradle. When she goes into the water, when the water's deep enough, the boat floats off the cradle. You move the boat backwards and withdraw the cradle from underneath, and the boat is launched. We were able to do that on or off her original cradle, which is rather nice. And there she was, for the first time in 75 years, since 1938, bobbing about in the water at Buell Reservoir, afloat. We left her in the water for 6 hours on that day, and the bonus was it didn't sink. So we sort of knew that the hull restoration was good, and we could finish off mechanical work and whatever we had to do with the view to running it under its own power again, which was to be done in 2012. So we worked steadily through the winter of 11 and 12, and we were back at Buell Reservoir on the 26th of June 2012. So the way the boat works is exactly the way the boat would have worked when it was raced, breaking the records. you have to warm the engine up so the engine is thoroughly warm, and then support boats will manoeuvre the hull to a point in the lake where you're going to do a run, and then you shut the engine down, put it into gear, so the dog clutch is not a slipping clutch, and effectively the clutch is either in or out, and you put it into gear, and when you put the mag switches on, press the start button, the engine fires, that's it, you're off. There's no brakes or anything like that. The only brakes you've got is ignition, cut the ignition. So that process went through, and I was in the pilot seat, and so we've got quite a lot of power behind you, it's quite noisy. And I pressed the start button, we did everything, warmed the engine up, pressed the start button, engine fired, and that was it, off I was, across the lake. First time the boat had been back in working order, moving under its own power since 1938. And so what happens is the stern of the boat goes down, and the bow of the boat at the front goes up, and when you increase the throttle, gradually she'll climb over the bow wave, and then she'll start getting turbulence and air behind the step on the hydroplane, and that will push the hull clear of the water, and as you go faster that gets further and further out of the water, there's less and less drag, and that's where she gets the speed from, is basically getting clear or out of the water. So we did about 6 runs on that day. We increased our speed up to sort of 40 miles per hour on the day, which doesn't sound much, but it's quite, first time this boat's been back in action since 1938, and we came back absolutely elated that we've got the boat back in working order. So we thought, well, what do we do now? And we thought, well, we'd like to go a bit faster. So we couldn't wait to get back to the reservoir, try again in 2013. And we went back to the reservoir, and within 15 minutes I'd busted it. So the problem was in the gearbox, and we had to come back, and over the winter of 13-14 the gearbox had to come out, had to be stripped and checked over and rebuilt. Some bit of extra shimming was done in the gearbox, and it was put back in, and we were back at the reservoir in 2014. We're having quite a good day until I busted it again, which was the prop shaft. So we have 1,500 pound-foot torque coming out of the engine, and the prop shaft gave up, and so we had to come back, redesign the prop shaft, build it bigger, build it stronger, put it in the boat. We were back at the reservoir 2015, and we had problems with the engine, and then ended up having a carb fire on board. And I'm glad to say the people that made us put all the safety around the engine with the fire extinguisher, it paid off, because we sorted the problem out without any problem. But basically that was a carburettor float was holed, and it was sinking, flooding the front carburettor on the engine, the engine fire. 2016 was a very frustrating year. We just didn't have enough budget to go testing, and it wasn't until 2017 we were back at the reservoir for another go. But we had two-day test in 2017, booked at Buell Reservoir. The new owners of the reservoir at that point wanted a lot of publicity. So we had all the cameras there, the BBC and this and that, and a lot of people spectating and watching. And I was thinking, I hope this boat works. So I go 5 minutes and I break it again, Anyway, as it turned out, we had 2 very good days, 100% reliability, multiple runs on both days, and the boat behaved itself very well. And we're now getting up to what we wanted to get up to is 50-60 miles per hour, which is basically our target for demonstration speeds, was up to 60 miles per hour. But that sort of speed, the boat sounds nice and it looks right on the water, and we didn't feel that there was any need to go a lot faster than that. So we came back to the workshop and we were thinking, what do we do now? We've got a boat that works, and we thought, well, what we'd really like to do is go back to Lake Maggiore and see if we can get a run across the lake in Switzerland. When we were having our cups of tea in the workshop, the pipe dream was always to take it back to Lake Maggiore. So over the winter of 2017-2018, we contacted the mayor of Locarno, which was the little town where she broke the records in 1937, and said, you know, we've restored Bluebird, could we bring it back? And we got to talk to other people, tourism people, and were invited down in April 2018 to go and meet them. So we had to fly down, and we went and met everybody. We had a meeting of about 3 hours long. We thought we were going to meet about 2 people. And when we got in there, there's a room full like this. All people throwing questions at us and all sorts of stuff. But anyway, cutting a long story short, from that meeting we got the permission and an invite to take the boat down there in July of 2018, which was going to be her 80th anniversary of her last record. So at that point I'm really panicking because we've got permission to go, and transport was going to be about £12,000. So I needed to get some sponsorship, and fortunately I got the sponsorship for the transport. That was the biggest tick off the list, and we got a bit of sponsorship from local firms and bits and bobs, and we arrived back in Lake Maggiore. The boat was back in Lake Maggiore 80 years after her last record. So the Swiss wanted us to be on static display for 2 days, and then on the last day, the 3rd day, they were going to allow me in the water for 1 hour on one of the days, the last day, for 1 hour. So it wasn't long, but we thought we'd got to try and do it. So we got the sponsorship, got down there, we met a lot of lovely people over the 2 days that the boat was statically displayed. We were able to display our sponsors' banners at the front of the boat, and they put barriers up around it. We met 2 gentlemen in their 90s who both remembered the boat back in the day, hearing the sound of the boat roaring across the lake. And one of the gentlemen, who was 96 at the time, was one of the little boys who was dressed in a sailor's outfit that sat on the deck there next to Sir Malcolm Campbell. He had Sir Malcolm Campbell had the laurels on, he just got his record, and this little boy was having his photograph taken next to Sir Malcolm Campbell, and that photograph I have in my collection. And we actually met the man that was the lad that sat on the deck all those years ago. Some other things happened that were really quite incredible. One was that on the day we got to run the boat, we were allowed to launch the boat on the very same slip that was used when Sir Malcolm Campbell was there back in the 30s. We also had the members of the Locarno Rowing Club came out to assist us to launch the boat, and the same rowing club assisted Sir Malcolm Campbell to launch the boat back in the day. Not the same people, but the same members of the same club came out to launch it. And when Bluebird was lowered down into the waters of Lake Maggiore, down the slip, when she floated from her cradle, we had a big crowd that gathered up on the quayside up above us. And when she floated off the cradle, there was a big round of applause and a big cheer, because Bluebird was back. She was back after 80 years, back in Lake Maggiore again. So we had 1 hour to do the business in, do the demonstration runs, and I'm very pleased to say that the boat did not let us down at all, and we managed to get 10 runs up and down the shoreline of Lake Maggiore in the 1 hour, and the boat came back in one bit and I came back in one bit, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is the history of this old boat thus far. There might be some more adventures yet.